distinguished guests, partners, online participants, welcome to this session called From Fragmentation to Collective Action, Building Trust and Resilience Through Coalitions on Information Integrity. I'm Sarah Lister, I'm Director of Governance at UNDP. And on behalf of UNDP and in partnership with the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development in Germany and the Attorney General's Office of Brazil, I'm very happy to welcome you to this open forum session at IGF2025. We are meeting at one of the world's most important gatherings for shaping the future of digital governance, and the growing number of sessions we've noticed focused on information integrity sends, we think, a powerful message. This isn't any longer a niche tech issue. It sits at the heart of how we protect trust, participation, and democracy in the digital age. The impact of information pollution in our societies is significant, as we all know. It can distort public discourse, fueling polarization and undermining the accountability and responsiveness of governance systems. It can delegitimize electoral institutions and processes, even those conducted with integrity. This erosion of trust strikes at the foundation of democratic systems. From Latin America to Sub-Saharan Africa to Southeast Asia, our partners are sounding the alarm that the integrity of public debate is under threat, that hate speech, particularly against women and minorities, is on the rise, and that new technologies, including AI, are accelerating both the spread and sophistication of harmful content. In today's digital landscape, where information holds immense power and misinformation can cause real harm, no single actor can address these challenges alone. Whether it's international organizations, governments, platforms, or civil society, all of us have a role to play. That's why collaboration and coalitions are more important than ever, and that's what we're here to discuss today. But before we start the panel discussion, and I'm delighted to have 3 panelists here in the room with me and 3 panelists online, so we have a busy session this afternoon, please allow me to share a short example from UNDP's own work to illustrate the value of collaboration and coalitions. In 2022, along with our key partners, UNDP recognized the need for a coordinated global response to the ongoing challenges, and we launched the Global Action Coalition on Information Integrity in Elections, bringing together diverse global and regional stakeholders. And I see many of those stakeholders with us today, both in the room and online. And this, as we gathered momentum at the global level and results began to emerge, we also recognized the need for coordinated action at the national level. And in 2024, we supported the creation of national coalitions on information integrity to engage stakeholders in protecting the integrity of electoral processes at the national level. These provide structured mechanisms for multi-stakeholder collaboration, bridging gaps between civil society, media, EMBs, government, institutions, platforms, and other stakeholders to foster collaboration and resilience against information pollution. And these coalitions are showing real results. In countries where UNDP supports this work, we've seen how they coordinate rapid response, help foster stronger collaboration, improve coordination around elections, and support more consistent, informed responses to information challenges. So I'm happy to share that with continued support from the government of Germany, we will build on these insights to support a new set of national coalitions, with the aim of promoting the integrity of the information ecosystem, not just around elections, but more broadly. So today's session brings together a diverse and experienced group of voices to reflect on this urgent challenge around digital governance, how to build those effective coalitions and multi-stakeholder partnerships to protect information integrity. So we feel privileged to have with us today in person, here next to me, Dr. Rafael Ramos Monteiro de Souza, National Prosecutor of the Union for the Defense of Democracy at the Office of the Attorney General of Brazil. Online, we have Constanze Nehe, Head of Directorate Development Policy Issues at the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Also here, we have Gisela Lomax, Senior UN Advisor, Information Integrity on Digital Platforms, UNHCR. We have Bojana Kostiwska, media and platform regulation expert at the Global Forum for Media Development. Online, we have Ayman Mana, Executive Director of the Samir Kasia Foundation. And online, we also have Francesca Scapola, the Election Integrity Public Policy Lead from TikTok. So you will see that we have representatives from across government, from civil society, from the platforms, from the UN system. And together we'll explore what it takes to move from fragmentation to collective action. And we do invite you, the audience, here in the room and online to participate and ask questions and challenge what you hear. So just before we dive into the discussion, let me just take a moment to tell you what to expect. It's designed as a roundtable style, interactive, as much as is possible with headphones and online and offline. I'll do my best to support a dynamic exchange. So we've asked all our panelists to make short interventions, and then we hope to have a chance to open up for open dialogue. There is one microphone here in the room and the opportunity online as well. So in order to support that hybrid participation, we've arranged the lineup to alternate between in-person and online speakers to try and keep the flow going. So I've asked each of the speakers to make an initial 3-minute opening reflection to focus on their experience with multi-stakeholder cooperation, coalition building, and platform engagement around information integrity. So we'll start here on my left with Dr. Raphael. Could you perhaps, thinking of information integrity, give us some thoughts on what you see as the most pressing risks, and where do you find signs of progress or hope?
Okay. Good afternoon, Sarah, dear colleagues, everyone here in the audience, and also online. Well, first of all, thank you for the invitation. It's an honor to join the discussion here at the IGF, learn from different perspectives, and have the opportunity to share some thoughts from the Brazilian experience. Regarding pressing risk, as you know, many studies indicate that the rapid development of the emerging technologies, particularly generative AI, will impact the entire cycle of this information, from the stage from creation, segmentation, to the massive distribution. We are facing a time when the process is becoming cheaper, easier, and faster. Such mechanisms enable more convincing, realistic, and personalized content, as the fake stage shows. Well, in a global and local context marked by extreme polarization, low accountability, low digital literacy, this scenario supercharges a perfect storm that reinforces the threats not only to democracy and elections, as the recent Romanian, Argentinian case remember us, but also to vulnerable groups, often targeted by hate speech, online and gender violence, fraud, and scams. But on the other hand, we are seeing some progress in light of the regulatory response and safeguards information integrity at the national, regional, and international level as well. The most significant is based on the core idea that behaviors that are illegal online must also be legal. Offline is also illegal online. In this sense, from a multi-holder set of tasks, the private sectors plays a central role in ensuring a safe, secure, and reliable environment. To design the line of the DSA framework, many jurisdictions are advancing holding tech companies more accountable and transparent, imposing obligations, and while also demanding the respect of human rights. As the Brazilian Supreme Court is about to conclude this week, in some cases also holding platforms liable for third-party illegal and harmful content, including damages from ads and boosted posts. This remarkable shift emphasizes consumer rights, child protections, and other existing provisions over the company's immunity. At the same time, in our case, it's essential to note that these developments occur alongside a strong commitment to freedom of expression, opinion, press, opposition, humor, which are preserved as protected discourse and pillars of a vibrant public sphere. While there is no silver bullet for these issues and many gaps remain unsolved, these enforcement strategies are part of best practice and bring us closer to the implementation of international human rights standards, including UN principles, UNESCO guidelines, and the OECD recommendations. So we believe that when combined with preventive, collaborative, and long-term measures, these efforts can empower all the stakeholders to tackle these challenges. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I think many of us have been looking to the processes going on in Brazil and how the judicial system is involved and how the balance between supporting a variety of human rights while maintaining that balance between freedom of expression and safety and protection of minorities is playing out in your context. So we're delighted to have you here and thank you for your contribution. We'll pass the floor now to Ayman Mana from the Samir Kassir Foundation. Ayman, it's great to see you again. Look forward to your reflections also as the most pressing risks and where you find signs of progress or hope.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much for the invitation. Sorry for not being able to join you personally. The most pressing risk is the fact that civil society is asked to play a very important role in building coalitions, in cooperating with different actors, and in fighting effectively information manipulation, while civil society is now more than ever itself under attack, not only attacked by smear campaigns and disinformation campaigns that are building on the anti-elite sentiment, on the conspiracy theories related to the hidden agendas and everything we very often hear, but also under attack by the funding cuts it's experiencing all over the world. The US is very explicit about its strategy to cut funds for international development, but European countries are also going through significant budget cuts, while at the same time announcing that fighting information manipulation is a top priority. And another major challenge that civil society is facing in this context is the lack of clarity among the different other players, mainly donors, about what's needed from the different players in the field of combating mis and disinformation. Because in the context of funding cuts, and if I am a decision maker when it comes to funding programs in Brussels, in Paris, in the US, in London, is my priority to help sustain London, Paris, Copenhagen, Berlin-based organizations that work globally, or my objective is to actually fight against mis and disinformation where it's taking place on the ground? Sometimes these two objectives don't coincide because you need to actually cover salaries and taxes and rent in countries that are very expensive, which reduces the impact and effectiveness of what you can do on the ground. Sometimes also, and I do have maybe in another iteration of our discussion, I can read very explicitly, without necessarily mentioning the donor, a formal written answer by one of the major donors on a program related to information manipulation and information integrity, telling us that our urge is to give the impression we are doing something more than necessarily the full effectiveness of the project. So these are some of the challenges: funding cuts, smear campaigns and disinformation campaigns against civil society, lack of clarity about the objectives of the donors, why we're being asked to actually act in the most effective way to save democracy, to save human rights, and to save trust in societies. Otherwise, the whole fabric of the society will collapse. What to do? We'll definitely also explore these ideas much further in the upcoming iteration, but it's once and for all an ecosystemic approach to fighting for information integrity and for trust. And when I talk about ecosystemic approach, it's not necessarily always through formal coalitions, but making sure that actors that have very often been excluded from the discussion, such as private sector, SMEs, people in the tech world, but not necessarily the big tech, but like who are amazing engineers, amazing people in the tech sector and academia in different countries, how they can work effectively together with creative ideas, leveraging the different areas of experiences of the different players, and where silos and prejudice from, for example, civil society organizations that are often left-wing leaning towards private sector and SMEs and people who are entrepreneurs in several sectors, how they can work together. Like, bridging these gaps is today not only essential to win the fight for information integrity, but definitely to win the fight for trust and cohesive societies in countries where everything risks collapse. And I come from a country that has experienced war a few months ago, from a region that went through a war situation just last week. Information and lack of trust in information was a fundamental weapon used by all belligerents. So imagine if this continues, our entire society is at risk. Thank you.
Ayman, thank you very much for laying out those challenges that civil society is facing, from the geopolitical to the institutional, and a whole spectrum, and then sort of honing in on indeed that topic that we're here to discuss in more depth, that ecosystemic approach and how we can build coalitions for collective action. We're turning now again to the room, to Gisela. What do you see as the most pressing risks, and where do you find signs of progress or hope?
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank you for inviting me to take part in this important event. And I echo your words at the beginning that the amount that we've seen information integrity on this IGF programme really is very encouraging, and I would say that in the first instance, although the challenges are huge. This is the first Internet Governance Forum I've attended. I lead UNHCR's information integrity capacity, and if anybody is unfamiliar with UNHCR, who's probably not one of the best known players in the internet governance ecosystem, although we have been present for many years. We're one of the UN's largest humanitarian organisations with a refugee protection mandate, working in 133 countries around the world to protect the world's refugees, forcibly displaced and stateless communities, which I think we recently announced is around 128 million people. So a word on the threats to start with. Threats to information integrity on digital platforms, especially such as misinformation, disinformation and hate speech, are very much correlating and causing and leading to real-world harm, especially in war, conflict, emergency, humanitarian settings. And whilst I feel that there's a good amount, never enough, but a good amount of attention to the issues of information integrity in elections and public health, we'd like to see a bit more attention to the humanitarian dimensions, and that's part of what brings me here this week. So we see harm towards refugees, hate speech, inciting violence, people exploiting online spaces, spreading misinformation to deceive refugees with false promises of safety or employment, leading them into dangerous situations, and also influencing public narratives to become even more hostile and polarised, framing refugees as security, economic or cultural threats, and in turn influencing public policy. And of course, new and emerging tech is transforming that, but I won't get too much into that, perhaps in the questions. I would also say that we're seeing challenges to humanitarian action itself. A survey we ran of UNHCR staff across some 85 countries found that 20% of our colleagues have directly and personally been targeted with mis and disinformation in the capacity of their role. So we're seeing miscoordinated false narratives, misinformation, which is practically preventing or hampering the delivery of often life-saving aid, restricting access, eroding trust in humanitarian actors, undermining our credibility and impartiality as well. But there are opportunities to strengthen digital protection, which is how we frame this work, protecting refugees in the digital sphere and the real world, and the correlation between. Improving access to reliable and life-saving information. That's very much part of our work and our partners, to provide trustworthy, credible information. And that's hampered by misinformation in social media themes and algorithms that don't promote. They may be less exciting and emotive, but frankly, critical information. upholding freedom of expression. True freedom of expression is freedom of expression for everybody, including refugees, and of course the ability to receive information as well as to impart ideas, foster social cohesion, and to build digital resilience and trust. I'll give some examples in the second part, but one thing I would say from our model at UNHCR, which is a combination of field-based pilot projects, practical work on the ground, and then a small headquarters capacity, is that this can only be done, of course, in partnership. And we heard about funding cuts. The humanitarian sector has been dramatically affected by funding cuts, and as we have less, we have, of course, to be smarter, more efficient, to work collaboratively. There's a lot of skill sets that perhaps do not have a natural home in humanitarian organisations, digital analysis and so on. How do we partner with organisations that can share that skill set and expertise with us, and share resources as well? Hopefully I can speak a little bit more about some examples later on. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Gisela, for highlighting those aspects as it affects the humanitarian sector, and particularly refugees and displaced persons who are often amongst the most excluded on our globe, and subject to abuse offline and online. We're going to turn back online now to Constanze Neher from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Sarah. Good afternoon, Sarah and colleagues. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm sorry that I can't be with you in person, but I'm happy that I can be with you online. And as Sarah said, I'm head of the Directorate in the Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development for general policy issues. And I'm far away from being an expert in information integrity. But I think information integrity is one of the main ongoing future challenges worldwide. Disinformation is not just noise in the digital space. It has become a structural threat to democratic governance and open societies. It undermines public trust, distorts political participation, restricts media freedom, and increasingly shrinks civic space. What we face is not just misinformation, but a strategic and calculated exploitation of digital spaces and tools for geopolitical influence, economic leverage, or the suppression of democratic voices. It is important to highlight this is not a technical issue, it is a governance challenge. To address this challenge, we need more than good intentions. We need effective and trusted coalitions. No single actor, not governments, platforms, no civil society or media can tackle this threat alone, and I would add, nor the economy. From our work in partner countries, we have learned three core lessons. First, coalitions must be embedded in broader democratic reform efforts. Second, local ownership is non-negotiable. Only coalitions led and shaped by national actors will endure. Development partners must support. Third, context beats blueprint. What works in one country may fail in the other. Solutions must be rooted in local realities, political dynamics, and include all relevant actors. In this regard, we very much value our partnership, Sarah, with UNDP. Together, we support meaningful national coalitions that reinforce information ecosystems and democratic norms and engage in global discussions.
Thank you. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you for highlighting this aspect of it as a governance challenge that we are facing to democratic norms and human rights. And we also very much appreciate the partnership with you in this area and look forward to the new set of national coalitions that together we can help support our national partners in putting together. I'm turning now back to the room to Bojana from GFMD. Please go ahead.
Yeah, good day, everyone, and thank you. Thank you for having me on this session. Yes, today I'm speaking on behalf of Global Forum for Media Development. We are a member-based network of media development and journalism support organization. And to address your question, yeah, I think that we are living in a world that is boiling with pressing issues. And from the perspective of media and journalism, this can be actually best seen through this collision of power, of interest, what was already mentioned by my co-panelists, with of the states with certain autocratic tendencies and incredible political, economic power of big tech companies. Yeah, and here I'm not only meaning like the usual culprits like social media or search engines, but also those that actually own AI systems, own data storages, and basically run this whole data governance frameworks. As we all know, according to the latest Freedom House report, right, we are living in a world that is facing for 18 consecutive years democratic backsliding, and 2024 was the year where this breadth and depth of this deterioration reaches a new level. And Sarah, you already mentioned a few of the reasons why we are seeing this is like behind rigged elections, armed conflicts, all sorts of different things that we are seeing, but also state leveraging their power to kind of capture the media. So as we can see, partly some of these problems that we are seeing in the world are connected or related to the lack of actual media pluralism, media viability, erosion of trust in media, and all sorts of things. So to actually enable kind of a right or safeguard information integrity is actually, it means to kind of safeguard media integrity, right? These two issues are intrinsically integrated and in kind of interconnected. And yes, signs of hopes I think are everywhere. Like what my previous co-speaker just said, we are seeing in a numerous way like how like we work together, and this actually within the scope of the work of GFMD, working in partnership and cross collaboration is actually the way we work. And GFMD is one of the thematic lead, actually, of the Team Europe Democracy Network Working Group 3 on media and digital. And with the support of the colleagues from GIZ and with the support of other civil society organizations and media freedom organizations, we are actually working jointly with all of them on developing a toolkit to support the implementation of the previously mentioned OECD principles for OECD principles on effective support for media. So the aim here is actually to help, again, to this cross-collaboration and intersectoral collaboration, to help EU member states, to help the EU institutions integrate these principles that are themselves also developed through partnerships into their policies, into their democratic institutions, and to ensure that actually information integrity as such, but also, as I said, as a bedrock of it, media freedom, actually becomes a pillar of the way we kind of address information integrity issues. Again, and this can be only done through collaboration. I will address a few more examples in the second question. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. And I realised I used an acronym that not everybody may be familiar with. You brought why media are central to this discussion in your contribution. But GFMD is the Global Forum for Media Development. Do you just want to say one word of what that is for those who are not familiar with it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, as I said, like we are, we are a member. We are a network of 200 members that are working on issues related to safeguarding media viability in particular, and trying to kind of address different funding problems, trying to kind of change the narrative on the ways the funding are being governed and run, and actually make sure that this is done through collaboration and kind of a raising up from this bottom-up approach. But I will actually explain a bit more about the way we work in my second.
Great, and thank you so much for bringing that voice to our conversation this afternoon. And last of this round, but very much not least, we have Francesca Scapola from TikTok. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you very much for the opportunity to join such incredible panelists today and share a little bit more about like the challenges that we see as a platform in terms of like information integrity, but also the role that the increasingly important roles that platforms like TikTok play when it comes to safeguarding information integrity through multi-stakeholder collaboration. I would say that we saw on our side that platforms have become the the TikTok and similar platforms, has shifted from passive observers to active partners when it comes to protecting information integrity. So on our side, we have expanded a lot our collaboration with different partners, those being fact checkers, independent fact checkers, but civil society organizations, and also governments and governments in trying to really tackle misinformation and disinformations. When it comes to the biggest challenges that we see on our side, I would say that these are mis and disinformation, but also covering influence operation. We have established strong rules against actors that are trying to manipulate information on our platform when ahead of elections, but also ahead of like other key civil moments. And we also have established different strategies to make sure that we engage constantly with different actors, because we value partnership and collaboration. This is, in fact, one of our key pillars when it comes, for example, to protect elections integrity. And it's something that we value very much. We have established, for example, local safety advisory councils, which are groups of academic and civil society leaders that advise us on policy matters and really help us anticipate emerging threats within our community. We know that this is an evolving field and there is more to come. We've seen different examples through various elections across the globe, and we're always trying to make sure that we stay ahead of different threats, and we keep improving our policy and our community guidelines to tackle emerging threats like disinformation, but also manipulated content, AI generated content, but also deepfake and chipfake, and trying really to make sure that we collaborate actively with different actors, and we try to really stay ahead of emerging threats.
Thank you so much, Francesca, and thank you for bringing that perspective from the platforms or from TikTok to us this afternoon, and the willingness to engage in ongoing dialogue on these issues. It's much appreciated. So we've come to the end of the first round, and I want to thank all the speakers for being disciplined. We are not very far behind where we should be. So we can head now into a second round where we can talk in a little bit more depth from the perspectives of the panel members and their experiences. Again, I'd ask you all to be disciplined and stay brief so that we do have an opportunity to open the floor. So we're going to turn back to Dr. Rafael. And as you indicated, Brazil has been at the forefront of addressing information integrity challenges. What, in your experience, have been some of the mechanisms that have proven most effective in fostering this collaboration across sectors that you mentioned?
Okay, thank you for the question, Sarah. First, I would like to mention that our unity against disinformation within the Attorney General Office, known by the acronym PNDD in Portuguese for National Prosecution for Defense of Democracy, has its DNA driven by principles of collaboration and social participation. This context, for instance, the unit was effectively established in the first semester of 2023, following a broad public consultation on its limits and provisions. At that time, more than 80 specialists from civil society, from academia, practitioners, and fact-checking agents contributed as a formal work group to guide its implementation. That was a valuable mechanism. And similarly, last January, AGU conducted a public hearing to examine the implications of Meta's policy content moderation shifts, particularly those related to hate speech and fact-checking activities. Such inputs coming from different actors were fully presented before the Supreme Court for consideration as a technical briefing. Additionally, the third mechanism, cooperation agreements, serve as a valuable tool and have provided substantial evidence for legal action. We have signed a memorandum of understanding with leading research institutes and universities. And we are also planning to work together with fact-check agents. It is noteworthy that one of our recent lawsuits against Meta, which aimed to curb scams involving ads that utilize government symbols and manipulate images of public figures, was built on this type of partnership. Digital platforms are also actors with whom we seek to collaborate. This way, during last year, massive floods in the state Rio Grande do Sul in Brazil, The leading companies agreed on a protocol to combat disinformation and clarifying aspects that threaten public service and government response during the extreme weather event. At the international level, it's worth noting that following the last G20 summit, Brazil is leading a global initiative on information integrity on climate change, alongside UNESCO, UN, and other 7 countries, including France, UK, Chile, Sweden, and Denmark. This recent coalition will certainly inform our next steps and new actions related to environment field, especially considering the upcoming COP30 in Brazil. Well, to sum up, it's clear that contemporary information integrity challenges must also be addressed by encouraging cooperative approach, bringing together different stakeholders. Therefore, we are looking forward to engaging in new national, cross-sector and cross-border partnerships to this end.
Thank you very much for being very practical in your answer and outlining very practical mechanisms, working groups, public hearings, coalitions. I'm sure there'll be many other countries present who will want to ask questions about that and learn from the Brazilian experience. That's very helpful. Thank you. We're going back online to Constanza for the next question. And in your first intervention, you talked about how information integrity is essential for democratic governance and democratic development in all contexts, including in the Global South. And what have been the most effective tools that you have found to help defend democracy in these contexts?
Yeah, thank you so much, Sarah, for this question. Maybe let me clarify first one thing, and you already mentioned it. It's not only about the Global South, but strengthening information integrity is essential for democracy worldwide. Yeah. And I think we should look a bit at the interconnectedness of the issues. And strengthening information integrity is not a technical task. It's a democratic necessity, I would say. Without access to trusted, pluralistic information, citizens cannot make informed decisions, hold governments to account, or resist manipulation. In short, no integrity, no democratic legitimacy. Disinformation is not an unavoidable disturbance. In our digital systems, it is a targeted strategy. In authoritarian contexts, it is used to support dissent and silence journalists, human rights defenders, and civic voices. In democracy, it erodes electoral trust, fuels division, and weakens civic space. We noticed that in Germany too. Unfortunately, this often has a gender component. Women in public life are disproportionately affected by disinformation and hate speech. In many of our partner countries, we were witnessing the strategic use of disinformation as a tool of disruption. Just let me put an example. In Africa, more than 60% of major disinformation campaigns are reportedly financed by foreign state actors, or, I would add, by strategically used private actors. I'm just bearing in mind disinformation campaigns against LGBTIQ rights in Kenya or Ghana, fueled by US-based evangelical groups. We observe how these campaigns undermine electoral processes, fuel hate speech, and deepen social divides. And in fragile democracies, the consequences are particularly severe. It affects political stability, public safety, and social cohesion. If we want to defend democracy, it needs more than open elections. It needs open information environments. So strengthening information integrity is one effective way to protect civic space, counter democratic backsliding, and enable democratic innovation. And partnerships, when rooted in trust, ownership, and a clear purpose, are key to delivering that. From our work in partnerships, 4 strategic approaches stand out, I think. First, advanced media and information literacy at all levels, not just for users, but for policymakers, I would include myself, civil society, educators, and influencers. Understanding how narratives are shaped is essential to respond constructively. Second, support smart regulation with safeguards. Regulation is needed, but must be designed to protect democratic values and freedom of expression. The aim is accountability, not censorship. Third, strengthen public interest media. Independent journalism remains one of the strongest means against disinformation. It requires stable financing, legal protection, and public trust. And fourth, invest in meaningful coalitions. We heard a lot about how you work in effective coalitions, how you work jointly. Just to put an example, in West Africa, we support multi-stakeholder observatories that connect governments, media, regulators, and civil society. And these platforms build evidence, strengthen institutional capacity, and promote coordinated responses to online harms. And maybe, as it was mentioned earlier, we support the Team Europe Democracy Initiative. We have shared approaches and peer exchange around digital democracy, media freedom, and protect of human rights. It's about the working group 3 my colleague mentioned earlier. And we also work on the topic with our strong, you might know them, and German government-financed DW Academy. Especially after the shutdown of USAID and the consequent withdrawal of funds, DW Academy definitely is a crucial actor in international media development who really seeks to work in coalition and to work jointly. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Constanza, and for highlighting again that, that transnational element, as well as the fact that these issues affect all contexts and dynamics in one stage or on the international stage can then be played out in a variety of different contexts. And another, thank Germany again for decades of support to this field of public interest media, including through the Deutsche Welle Academy and many other initiatives. So I'm turning now to Bojana, who I'm sure is delighted that Constanza has set the stage for what I imagine she may wish to say. Thanks.
Yes, I truly am, and thank you so much, Constanza, for kind of raising up this here all. Yeah, so at GFMD, we believe that a future sustainable funding support for independent media must be rooted in local agency, as Constanza also said, and systemic transformation, right? So our work is fundamentally about shifting both narrative and power. So moving away from these top-down models and instead enabling these grassroots leadership, shaping information ecosystems that affect their communities most, like keeping it local. So there are two principles, going back to your question before, Sarah, there are two principles that emerge in the work. It's like a bottom-up empowerment. So we want to see more of these local responses to regional solidarity to kind of lift them all up. So the way we start by listening to a very participatory approach. Our support to our member, like Ayman Mana, panelists at the Samir Kassir Foundation exemplifies this. In the wake of the Beirut port explosion, Ayman and his colleague launched a uniquely community responsive media fund tailored to Lebanese context. And GFMD helped by bringing in the donors to listen people closest to the story, turning these ad hoc emergency grants into something that is community design, right? And governed pooled fund. Also, with Ayman and other Ukrainian colleagues recently, we articulated an event organized with Sarah's UNDP colleagues, right? Where we build the trust and information integrity and try to strengthen these community ties and long-term localized investment. That is really important if we are to see this bridging between all different actors and their different interests, but also like all different human rights that we are also trying to address here in this way. Second kind of a principle of multi-stakeholder and partnerships and collaboration is building alternatives and innovating beyond traditional funding and governance by shifting power. Means going, as I said, beyond existing the donor, funders, and coordinations. We believe actually that bottom-up coordination with the new collective-owned infrastructure. So that independent media are not just funded, but they can also set the agenda, own the tools, and drive their own long-term sustainability. And the GFMD, with other partners, we are working on the Journalism Cloud Alliance, is one such initiative. It's an open cooperative platform that rethinks the cloud infrastructure that is the digital backbone of independent journalism. So by prioritizing interoperability, shared ownership, public interest governance, we are moving away from these dependencies that exist on big tech companies that I mentioned and extractive tools, and giving journalists and media public good in their own hands and not the other way around. So in doing so, we are actually challenging this assumption that underpin these traditional donor-driven models. So rather than replicating hierarchies, we are embedding equity in co-creation and sustainability in the very tools and infrastructure that media use every day. So it's an alternative way of thinking of it.
Thank you very much indeed for highlighting those elements of how actually many actors are coming together to try to shift these power dynamics as we see power getting concentrated across the world in certain actors and in certain ways that also feeds in often to geopolitical interests, that actually there are alternatives to that, and that many here in Lillestrøm are actually talking, that's what we're talking about this week. So thank you so much for bringing that perspective. So now we're going back online, back to Francesca from TikTok. So from TikTok's standpoint, how do you see the role of tech platforms evolving within multi-stakeholder coalitions on information integrity? Do you have any specific examples where your collaboration with coalitions has led to measurable improvements in electoral integrity or information resilience?
Yes, and thank you for your questions. I mentioned this briefly before, but I would say that in recent years, TikToks, and I could also extend this to platforms in general, have shifted from being passive observers to really active partners when it comes to protecting information integrity through collections, but also through like general partnership. We all see that tackling misinformation and disinformation really requires a coordinated actions and bringing together platforms, government, civil society organization, and independent fact checkers to try to pursue a common mission. On our side at TikTok, we have reinforced our moderation efforts through partnerships with over 20 global fact-checking bodies. And together we work with them to identify and also swiftly remove misleading content, including AI-generated one, whether false claims about election dates or attempts at voter suppression. And these are just examples. But this extends beyond election integrity efforts and to everything that is considered harmful misinformation on our platform. And alongside this, we also launched targeted media literacy campaigns, working closely with civil society organizations. And we also roll out in-app election center app across not only Europe, but worldwide. And these apps are really important because they deliver reliable information and try to equip users with tools to critically assess content. But I would say that this is just like part of like the work that we're doing when it comes to collaborating with different partners and coalitions on election integrity, because a cornerstone of our strategy is our continuous engagement with what I mentioned before, that is our local safety advisory councils, which is a group, again, of academic and civil society leaders who advise us on policy matters and really help us anticipate emerging threats within our community. But just to give you a few examples of how this cooperative approach was pan out and is like our work around the 2024 European Parliament elections. So in partnership with electoral commissions, but also civil society groups and fact-checking networks, we launched in-app election center in all the 27 EU member states. And these apps really offer verified guidance on voting procedures and also media literacy campaigns. And those was supported by thousands of moderators fluent in local languages, really enabling swift and accurate response to specific risk to those to the elections. And the impact on our side was clear because those election centers were viewed over 7.5 million times in the 4 weeks around the elections. And in addition to that, we also set up search banners where people, when searching for election video, they were redirected to these in-app elections. But this was also in addition to our work around removing harmful misinformation. And I can share that more than 200,000 videos violating our misinformation policies were removed, and over 96% proactively, with 80% being taken down before any view. So this was also like our work, an example on European side. But our efforts very much extend far beyond Europe. And I'm happy to share a little bit more also about what we did ahead of the South African's 2024 elections, where we work closely with the Independent Electoral Commission and civil society partners such as Africa Check and Code for Africa. And in that specific case, we established an election task force with experts from our internal teams, but also we launched a multilingual in-app election center, and that included also sign language, and also implemented various media literacy campaigns, and these also include videos, sign language videos, to try to reach diverse audiences. So I would say that platforms like TikTok now play a more and more important role when it comes to multi-stakeholders coalition to really build information resilience. And on our side, by trying to combine a proactive moderation, but also media literacy, transparency, engagement, and really trusted partnership, we have seen measurable results with millions of election center visits, proactive removals, and really impactful regional interventions. And really, these efforts demonstrate that when we unite behind a shared purpose across platforms, institutions, but also civil society, we can truly strengthen the integrity of our democratic information environment.
Thanks so much, Francesca, and for bringing those specific examples as well that show how this multi-stakeholder approach, where the platforms are also engaged along with civil society and electoral, in the case of elections, electoral bodies as well, can really affect the information environment and the information ecosystem around elections. We're coming back to the room now to Gisela. You spoke in your first intervention about, the humanitarian context where much of your work is done. In crisis-affected settings, as you noted, disinformation can deepen risks and undermine trust. How do you think the UN and humanitarian actors can take a stronger role in working with platforms and other actors to protect information integrity, especially where communities are hardest to reach?
Well, thanks very much, Sarah. I think maybe to start with, certainly the UN system is very much seized with the issue. And I think, as Raphael, I think you mentioned either the Global Digital Compact or the Global Principles on Information Integrity. These are obviously two key instruments, and we're very pleased that refugees were specifically mentioned in the Global Digital Compact and the section Information Integrity. In the humanitarian sector, as I've really emphasised, this is a grave concern, but frankly we do have massive challenges. I think everyone's probably aware of the financial issues, the funding issues we're facing, and so I will be frank that we're looking for more support to continue to ramp up this work in a collective way. But perhaps I could give just some examples of how we're working. I think, as Constanza said, emphasising the importance of local context, and I also heard another speaker talk about grassroots upwards. I think that was you. Local is core to our response, and simultaneously we're talking about a small number of global social media digital platforms operating largely in the same way regardless of context, yet the response has to be contextually specific. And so we're looking at coalitions and partnerships that are local, playing into regional, including regional governance bodies, playing into global, including engaging with these global platforms. I would say, I think that taking a local to global advocacy point, that people who use social media in less common languages, in non-commercial markets for these companies, war zones where they are not selling advertising, are disproportionately at risk. For various ways. And on this, we do have a need, and we're trying to do this at UNHCR, to collect examples and case studies that we can then bring to fora like this and bring to the platforms in a strategic and aligned way. But in terms of partnerships, I'll give a couple of examples. I mentioned local, and I'll also say community first. And so working with affected communities, with refugees themselves. I mentioned a survey we did of UNHCR personnel, and another question there asked, how many of our colleagues know of refugees and refugee-led organisations themselves taking direct action to strengthen information integrity, and more than 30% of our colleagues knew explicitly of refugee-led organisations. They're not waiting around for us. People are already acting, and I'm sure that percentage is actually way higher. And so how can we better support communities themselves in refugee camps, in humanitarian contexts? And I see that very strongly as part of our role. So we've been working with refugee groups, and especially women. I think Constanza also mentioned that gender dimension. Time and again, place after place, women and girls are also disproportionately affected. I mentioned in my earlier intervention the point about skill sets. For us, we've really had some promising partnerships with digital rights organisations, such as the Association for Progressive Communications, if I might give a flag to one of our partners. Academia as well. Governments, of course, we're a member state organisation, and I can see as I'm on the panel with Brazil, I'd like to say at the New York level, for the last 3 years, Brazil has co-organised a Protection of Civilians Week event on information integrity, which has been very important for bringing these examples up to policymakers at the New York level. I'd also like to highlight the government of South Africa. Yesterday, some of my colleagues had a dynamic session presenting a pilot project we're working on with the government of South Africa to tackle xenophobia and misinformation towards refugees and migrants. And I'm pleased to say our partner's actually in the room if you'd like to know more. I won't repeat what was said in the session, but we're very proud of this positive and constructive example. But perhaps before I close, and I can see the clock, coming to tech, digital platforms dominate the world's information ecosystems. And with great power comes great responsibility. They have an outsized responsibility to act, including in places that there's not a commercial imperative or a regulatory reason to do so. We work closely, we try to work closely with these platforms, but we are very worried by the weakening in guardrails and the reduction in trust and safety capacities. And so we really do encourage the platforms to continue to come to the table and engage and share information, and especially around early warning systems or consulting communities on policy development. We're here, we're open to partner, and I think this is a really important need we all need to press for. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. And if I can take my moderator hat off for a moment and comment in relation to your comment about the less common languages or the contexts in which money is not being generated for technology platforms because advertising is not considered a priority there, that we have also consistently saw that the attention to the information integrity and the response from platforms in those contexts has been very different from perhaps the focus that there is in Europe or elsewhere. But thank you for giving those very useful examples of what you're doing, and also reminding us all that what the UN system and global actors can do is always in support of those who are already taking action in their contexts. So we're coming to our last speaker, and I hope we'll have time to open up for questions shortly, so please be thinking about those. We're going back to Ayman for the last panel intervention. And I've done well with all my paperwork until this moment. Here we are. From a civil society perspective, what are some of the key challenges and the needs civil society actors face in participating in some of these collective action and these collaborations? You mentioned some of them in your first intervention. Perhaps you'd like to go a little bit deeper into that. Thanks.
Thanks. I mean, I'd place my last answer under the umbrella of walking the talk. Because we've tried so many instruments, fact-checking, yes, it's very important. It should be embedded in the role of every journalist. But at the same time, we know that, it depends on the whims very often of the platforms, whether or not to give visibility to the fact-checking responses whenever information that is purely incorrect is spread, and how much they have to actually boost their content to have some visibility, whereas horrible content may spread organically in terrible ways, and then the policies can change. And given also the level of polarization of society, you can show all the facts and all the numbers. We don't necessarily have evidence that it can sway significantly people who have already made up their mind. We speak about media information literacy. let's actually look at the numbers. I'm a number person. 2024, overseas development aid, roughly $212 billion. It's a 7% decline from 2023. Do you know out of these 212 billion, how much has gone to media, information environment, media development, independent media, journalism training, press freedom, digital literacy, journalist safety, etc.? It's around 0.5% of the 212 billion. So we're talking about nearly $400 million. And if we basically, so 0.19%, because the rest is infrastructure costs like broadband, etc. $400 million, let's compare it to the annual budget of Russia today, $600 million. Let's compare it to the budget of, the Iranian international TV system. That was $1 billion a year. So all donors in the world combined to support everything we spoke about with a lot of good intentions are only given $400 million a year. And out of which less than 1% is going to media information literacy. So we can have all these beautiful small projects in schools here and there. It's nothing compared to the budgets that are placed by those who are actively polluting the information ecosystem. So as long as we are not aware of the scale of the fight we're talking about, we remain at the level of good intentions. And this is what's painful for civil society organizations. We are asked to do so much while the means made available are laughable. I'm sorry for being so blunt. This is why it's a different approach that we're hoping for, where we need to do so much better with so much less, not more with less. And this is why I go back and close with my issue of an ecosystemic approach. I cannot believe that people who work in the hospitality sector, in the craft sector, in industry, in trade, and who are not necessarily part of our world and our conversations, are happy with a democracy or a political system where everything is collapsing. But how can we engage with them specifically for them to place their advertisement where actually independent media is doing a good job? How to actually bring organic money from the society to the fight for a better society and for better information. This is one of the key tracks we should be looking into. Same, how can we leverage the most important and smart brains in our academic circles and our research circles who are working with artificial intelligence, not only to import and adapt systems that major companies are launching, but what if we can develop local predictive algorithms for how to detect early on campaigns that are still in the making and be able to fight them way before they reach the scale they typically reach. This is why I go back always to the idea of working across the aisle, not with our opponents, across the aisle with people who are not today attending this conference, who we do not see in the media development conferences, in the international aid conferences, in the development conferences. The key to the solution resides in building bridges with them, because if we only want to rely on donor-grantee relationship, one, the budgets are decreasing. Two, the budget, even if they were not decreasing, are nowhere near what is needed to even engage in the beginning of a fight compared to what the nefarious actors are doing. So this would be my call, and hope I can at least find allies among so many of the participants to think about it more deeply together in the coming weeks and months.
Thanks so much, Ayman. That's a great way to wrap up the panel part with a call to all of us to branch out. We talk about coalitions, but to think creatively also about others who need to be in those coalitions. We have about 6 or 7 minutes for questions, maybe 5, so that we have a chance to go back to the panel for some responses. If you are in the room and you would like to ask a question, please line up at the microphone. And I gather there are a couple of questions online if we have time. So let's go to the lady at the microphone. Please introduce yourself as well.
Thank you. Nice to meet you. I'm Silvia Cadena. I'm the Worldwide Web Consortium. I'm the Chief Development Officer. It's really fantastic to hear the concern and work around building coalitions on information integrity, and I just wanted to point out that the technical community has been working a lot on provenance of information, and to be able to assist different new software, new tools to identify the reliability and the integrity of information that exists on databases and in different applications on the web. So I would like to call also the organizations that are supporting these creators, these content creators, to just refer to the W3C specifications to be able to incorporate those into how they create content, not only so that that content is rendered correctly according to cultures and languages, also to be accessible for people with disabilities and also interact with any platforms or tools for assistive technologies, but also to assist in information integrity. There is a lot of effort on personal IDs, wallets, payments, transactions, and all of those technologies are starting to interplay with other content that exists in relation to how you participate in democracy. So it's very important that the creators of this content use the standards, the metadata, the attributes of all the coding when they do, so that when someone is trying to help make assurances that that content exists, it is possible to do so. It is also important for when organizations are pulling content to train AI models. The more that content is categorized utilizing the existing standards, the more accurate that model will be in assessing, in assisting, mapping that information. So I know standards may not be the most sexy component in the room, but I always want to remind people that is very relevant to the work that coalitions are doing, that there are technical tools that creators and designers can use, that publishers can use, just to make sure that the content is relevant and easily accessible, and that the technology that exists to manage it can assist in that process. We are around the rest of the week. We are an email away, so please search for us, and we'll be very happy to explain some more about what we do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's a very important contribution. And I've just learned something. Yes, please go ahead in the room.
Can I directly? Okay. My name is Jan Lublinski. I work for DW Academy, so one of the larger media development organizations. I'm still a bit blown away by what Ayman just said, because I think he really expressed the urgency of what we're discussing here, and I can only congratulate you, Sarah, for this panel, because this is what we hope of the IGF to be, to have a multi-stakeholder dialogue that is really focused on burning issues and also really targeted towards focusing on what can be done, and not just only exchanging, but really thinking of what do we need to do. So I have a small comment, but then also a question that is then for Gisela. One observation in coalition building from my side, I think at the moment we're good in building coalitions now that the money is being shortened and we are in dramatic crisis situations. We're good at cooperating with the people we know well, with our own expert communities and our own communities of, in my case, media development and GFMD and so on. It's much harder than to bridge the gap to the neighbor communities. I'll give you two examples. There's the Media Freedom Coalition, and I'm engaged in the CN, the consultative network with civil society. But talking to the legal experts, it's so much harder. Talking to the foreign ministries and their groups, although this should be a multi-stakeholder process, the Media Freedom Coalition, it's really hard to actually do that. Same thing for the Europe Democracy initiative. We have 3 working groups, but these 3 working groups, one is on legal and institutions, one is on civil society, one is on media and digital. But they should be talking to each other, because democracy is not about individual silos, and this is quite a challenge. And my last comment, and this goes then to Gisela, is that I think we need the media development community and the community that works in communication in disaster-affected communities to come together. And we're trying to do that in December. We're hosting in Bonn at Deutsche Welle the annual meeting of the CDAC network, but also a media development community, the FOMI Media Development network meeting, so both in the same week, and we really want to make the effort to bring these communities together. But it's not easy. It's not just an individual conversation, because there are gaps and there are differences in understanding what needs to be done, to take on board local communities in situations of crisis and, really engage for refugees, as you rightly pointed out. So my question to you, Giselle, is what is important to bridge this gap in the case of humanitarian aid, communication, and media development? What do you think are the things we should be doing?
Thank you. Sorry to cut in. We have 2 more questions in the room, and then I'm afraid we'll close the questions. Apologies to people online, but I will hand back to the panel for 1 minute, kind of before we close. Please go ahead in the room.
Okay. Hi, my name is Yujie. I worked for one social media company before, and so in one of my research in information integrity last year, this question is related to the resource of fact-checking resources. So I looked at IFCN authorized fact-checking organizations, and found out, at least when I looked at it, none of them are based in Russia or China. And in fact, there's a lot of information actually also around these 2 countries. So my question may be to better, maybe addressed to the lady from the TikTok, is when you choose the partners from about fact-checking organizations, how do you evaluate it, the geological coverage? Or maybe, for example, the fact-checking resources on a special group like refugees. I'm just curious, maybe do you find out there might be enough resources for some groups or some countries or some facts that...
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Just the last question to the gentleman behind you, in as short as you can make it, please.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Raul Manuel, a member of parliament in the Philippines, representing the Youth Party. So my question is, can our resource persons share some of the best practices as to how the multi-stakeholder model can really be implemented in the context of elections? Because in the case of the Philippines, what we often have is more on bilateral. It's like the Commission on Elections with the media, the Commission on Elections with the big tech companies, but it's not really multi-stakeholder. So any insights? Thank you.
Thank you. And we can certainly follow up with you on that afterwards if there isn't time with the panel. Now, the clock has turned red, which I find very stressful. So I will turn to any of the panel members. Francesca, there was a specific question to you, plus any others who wish to make a comment, but don't feel pressured. So I'll take just 2 minutes at the end to wrap up. So Francesca, do you want to answer that question?
Yes, absolutely. So on our side, we work with 21 fact-checkers that are all accredited by the International Fact-Checking Network. So we understand one of our key aspects when we evaluate partnerships and coalition is trying to lean locally. So for us, it's very important when we evaluate potential partnership with fact-checkers to understand that they have capacity locally to really support our team and really support our work. So we do a thorough assessment, but I also want to, and I think this is very important, I also want to stress that we do not just partner with fact-checkers, but also with local civil society organizations. So when we launch, for example, media literacy campaigns, we generally try to reach out to local organizations and try to collaborate with them. So it's a very extensive and holistic approach that we use to make sure that we very much look into all the context that you mentioned, make sure that we cover as much as possible and give a voice on everyone on our platforms and make sure that we have all the resources available to support our community on that.
Thanks very much, Francesca. Bojana has passed on a final remark. So, Giselle, would you like to say something?
Yes, very quickly to the question on media development. And I did have that in my talking points, so I didn't have space. So I'm really grateful for the question from our fellow member of the CDAT network, Deutsche Welle Academy, who does outstanding work. And please count on us to join you in Bonn, I hope. I think what's missing is even more inclusion of communities, of course. Context is everything. I'm preaching to the converted, but still, let's try to mobilise that together. I would also say speed and something inspiring. There's an organisation, a Norwegian organisation I met this week. They have a stand in the marketplace. They're called Faktish. I'm sorry to Norwegians in the room for the pronunciation. A fact-checking organisation linked to a digital literacy arm called Tenk. Is that Think? Is that? Sorry, my Norwegian is still not very good after 5 days in Oslo. Anyway, I was so impressed. Within days of fact-checking misinformation, they have it on the curriculum in the classrooms. I think a 3-day turnaround from a major event, spinning out misinformation, to the teachers are given the tools to talk to the children. That is outstanding. Go and visit them. We need more of that. Back to you, Sarah.
Thank you. Ayman or Constanza, would you like to make a final remark? Ayman's shaking his head. I've never seen that before. Constanza?
So I would just make a very brief final remark. I'd really take with me Ayman's call for action and for action of media viability, to support media viability and organic funding from societies itself. Because I think we saw with the withdrawal of the US funding where it leads to, and how really the whole sector, the international media development, depends on international funding. And I just want to assure that we as Germany, via the Deutsche Welle Academy and GIZ and our partnerships I mentioned before, we will stay engaged, but we also suffer cuts, so it's working better together. And I really take with me, I quoted what Ayman said. He said, I have to do so much better with so much less. So that's my lesson I take away.
Thank you so much. Dr. Raffaella, in 30 seconds.
So consider all the challenges mentioned today. I do believe, again, that we need a mixed approach, combining cooperation, education, and liabilities to achieve an effective information environment.
Thank you. We have come to the end of our time. I don't really have time to wrap up more than to say, I think we've heard that coalitions of all sorts at all levels are the way forward, that actually working at local levels is super important, and we need to be looking outside at even beyond coalitions to those that we don't normally invite to coalitions. So I will just finalise by thanking all the panellists with me in the room and online. Jan was very gracious in congratulating me, but honestly I had little to do with this panel except showing up. I would like to thank the team and our partners in Germany and Brazil for putting it together, and thank the tech team for taking us through this session. Thank you very much. Thank you.